team is based on logic versus emotion, which is like a big thing specifically, obviously with Paige. She goes more on instinct, whereas Walter's more about the logic. Can you talk about how those two worlds collide and how you try to sort of make that work with their psychology?
Well, I think that's Paige's main role on the show. That's kind of the main thing that she's always trying to help the team of geniuses keep in mind, that they're dealing with lives. And I mean, obviously the geniuses, their main thing is always working off for the greater good. But that's that. I think if that whole dynamic between logic versus reason didn't exist, there'd be no reason for Paige, because she's just always trying to keep them, keep their sensitivity chip kind of in line.
I suppose they're conduit for emotionality, understanding, and talking to other people who they might be working with. But the whole debate about how you see, or perspective of how people see the world, or how they condition themselves. Is it nature? Is it nurture? Is quite interesting. We kind of, I think we take it as dogma, so we don't necessarily, we do sometimes get involved in saying, okay, so how did this manifest? Why are you feeling in this way? Or why did that start happening, where you purely look at it from a logical perspective. But Walter definitely does straddle the line, because I think he does have a huge emotional capacity, and that's why he doesn't really, it's not obtaining or not having the tools to articulate, and I think that's where a lot of the
great things that sort of led from last season into this season is the aspect of trust versus betrayal, acting or not acting, which can be looked at with the, basically what's happened with Mark, but then basically what happens, obviously, with Walter not letting, giving Paige tickets to take Tim, and then sort of trying to figure out what he's going to do. Can you talk about that? Because the whole idea of trust, especially the people who are so solitary sometimes, that have to work in a team, that's sort of a nice sort of balance between both professional and personal in terms of these characters.
Definitely does apply to the history of the characters. So we go back even in this season. We just finished shooting an episode where Walter goes to Ireland, and his family appear. So his father and his mother, and also other characters who you haven't met from his childhood appear. And I think when you talk about trust and logic and the fear of having your trust broken, that if you're to attack it in a psychological way, it's always about like how the characters come to that conclusion, whether they felt like they didn't have trust when they were a kid. And I think the nice thing about going back, and as all of our characters will at some point, you'll see like blasts from the past. They do reference the history and like how they came to this, how they came to being the person or the people that they are being. For me, it's, there is a lot of unresolved issues, or whether it's feeling neglect and feeling like a trust was broken or trust was never obtained. So I think in that way, it's definitely, there's a similarity to how Walter, the real life Walter O'Brien, looked at saying, hey, listen, I nurtured this ability. He said he looked at saying, well, he's going to be less hurt if he attacks things from a logical perspective. So I think it definitely sort of masks and saves you from feeling real highs and real lows in a way, if you just cordon off that emotionality. And that's what Walter's
talk about stakes, because the stakes have to keep getting higher, especially with the
storyline that applies to them. Then they'll be attacking, or they'll be approaching the situation in a different way. And I think for this episode, which premieres tonight at 9 p.m, we got the 2-hour special, and then next week we're going to be back to our new time slot of 10 o'clock. We see him being affected emotionally, or having his professionality compromised, as I suppose the quarterback of the team, because he's struggling with being in an intimate environment with Paige for the whole of the first episode, when he's really gone to Tahoe to say, to basically show his feelings of love, to open himself up finally. So in that way, the stakes are definitely raised, because he's juggling two obstacles. First of all, you've got the threat of cyber warfare and these hacked missile armaments being left rogue, but also how he is going to deal with the situation with Paige, because he has to spend all that time with the one person who he's trying to get away from, why he went to Lake Tahoe, or Tahoe. So I think there is definitely a raised stake in that way.